All right, Josh Smith here, live at my Flat Five Studios. My guest today is someone I'm literally an enormous fan of. I don't think I've even told you this, but the first time I saw you play was on my very first national tour. I was 16 years old, touring the States, and we had an off night. We were staying around DC, and you were playing either it was like the Bayou or the 8 by 10 someplace like that, trio. And it was the first time I saw you play, and I blew my mind,
Oh,
and
get
so
out
I
of here.
bought your records after that, and I've listened to you most of my life, man. And the fact that we're bros and I could call you up is pretty cool to me, and
Get out.
I don't know many people who have the pocket that you have, and it's been inspiring to me since the beginning. And your story is also really, really interesting to me, starting in Rhode Island and then going to the Bay Area, the commune, and the hippie side of your story, the guys that you were around, taking lessons from Satch, ending up on such an original thing that you've ended up doing. It's really mind-blowing to me, and I can't wait to dive into your story. But, dude, mostly, I'm just an enormous fan. Thank you for doing this. Everyone welcome Charlie Hunter.
Oh man, thanks for having me. Well, honestly, man, no bullshitting. Right back at you, man. When I discovered what you were doing, I heard you playing. I think was it with Raphael Sadiq? Am I right about that?
Maybe, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
for sure.
I saw you and I was like, this is the shit right here. This is how you do this, you know? And I remember thinking like, yeah, man, that's like real fucking tone right there, and real soul and real. But you could chop it up, of course, but that was an afterthought. That wasn't the important part of what you're doing. I was like, yeah, this is the language right here, man. The vernacular, the what I always try to tell people is about guitar is like, look, you got to seek people out that, yeah, you should listen to Joe Pass, you should listen to Wes Montgomery, you should listen to Peter Bernstein, Kurt Rosenwinkel. Of course, they're masters, but guitar is a vernacular instrument, and you gotta listen to the people. In my opinion, the shit that always moves me is people like you, like Kirk Fletcher, um Ariel Posen, all these people that now that I guess are kind of a little younger than me, but that you guys have that mix of the intellectual and the visceral, right? You
Sure.
have the vernacular, but if you have to play through some serious changes, you're playing through some serious changes. You know
Right,
what I
right.
mean? Anyhow.
Thanks, man. Well, that means a lot to me coming from you because it's always, I have that weird obsessive goal. Literally, my top goal is always, no matter how much more I learn or how more sophisticated I get as a player, technique wise, harmony wise, whatever, that I always still sound like that guy that I wanted to be when I was a kid, which was Magic Sam or Otis Rush or BB King, Stevie, Albert Con.
Yeah.
I want to feel like that because that's the stuff that
Yeah.
just nails me, and always has. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, but you hear it though, man. And that's the most important part,
Yeah,
because that means that it's coming through, that the real shit is coming through, you know.
yeah,
The stuff that, whatever it is that really hit you when you were young and made you choose this absurd path in life.
yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, speaking of that, I start all these by asking everybody, a little bit about the very beginning. So I don't know how musical your family was as far as playing, but I think that I read your mom repaired guitars. So is that how
Yeah.
the guitar ended up in your hands the first time? For sure, right?
Yeah, and I was didn't want to play guitar, man. I wanted to play drums, you
Yeah,
know. But she repaired guitars, we she was part of that whole Greenwich Village folk thing.
mm,
And my father was as well. Now, I didn't grow up with my father. I grew up with my mom and my sister.
mm,
But they were part of that whole thing, and also the political thing, like the lefty political thing, the whole
yeah,
WBAI. Like my
wow,
father's
yeah,
claim to fame was his he had two claims to fame. One was he was actually a pretty good banjo player and guitar player, actually. And his running partner was Dave Van Ronk. You know Dave Van Ronk?
yes, absolutely,
So
yeah,
that was like his running partner with they did all the music stuff, and they did the Trotskyite stuff, and they did the other stuff as well, right?
okay,
So, and then my mom was in that whole Greenwich Village scene. Her roommate was Maria Muldaur, right? They were like
Yeah,
always
the night
hanging,
at
and
the
Alan
Oasis.
Block.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alan Block, the father of Rory, who was the guy who made all the sandals and had that kind of place that was kind of the nexus of that Greenwich Village folk scene,
Jeez.
was like her homie as well. And so she spent, crazy enough, she's this, New York, cosmopolitan, rootless cosmopolitan New York Jew who spent all her time as a young woman around like Reverend Gary Davis, Mississippi John Hurt, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee,
Unreal.
Josh White, and Dave Van Ronk again. It's just like this whole thing, and Taj Mahal, who I grew up with one of Taj's kids. So that whole thing was a big part of my reality. Like that music was on all the time. That kind of whatever you want to call that culture, that kind of like
Sure.
lefty blues music, kind of political. I don't know. It's almost not even a Marxist dialectic. It's like a blind Blake dialectic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we were all over. We lived in a school bus and we drove around the country for like, 5 or 6 years. I don't know. I mean, it was a while. And then of course, where do people like that end up in the mid '70s? They end up in Berkeley, California, after like
Of
living on
course.
communes and doing all that stuff. So she ended up getting a job at Subway Guitars, which you probably have been to
Uh-huh. Yeah.
when you're on the road. So basically, I grew up in Subway Guitars as a little snot-nosed kid, either in Subway or like 10 blocks away was another place called Secondhand Guitars, which was where Joe Satriani taught guitar.
Hmm.
So my friends and I, we would either be at Subway messing with the instruments until they kicked us out and sent us over to the other place, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's basically how it happened, kind of like being surrounded by guitar knowledge and you don't know it, you know?
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, I can relate. I had a music store I could walk to from my house. And yeah, I would be there most days after school until my parents got home from work. And it was great because there was a 7-Eleven, a Little Caesars, a baseball card and comic book store, and a music store in this strip mall. It was everything I ever needed. I would get a Slurpee,
Why'd you ever
crazy
leave?
bread, buy the newest Spider-Man, and then go sit in the music store.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's like a dream. That's like a 13-year-old's dream right there, man.
Exactly. Exactly. But you don't realize
Except for
when
me,
you're...
it was the X-Men, buying the X-Men comics.
Oh, I was buying X-Men too. I'm an enormous comic nerd, like enormous.
Oh,
Yeah. I have a huge comic collection.
nice.
Yeah. But dude, I don't think people realize when it's going on. I didn't. The amount of knowledge I was gaining by osmosis just hanging in that music store at all times. Not even, yes, I was taking lessons at the beginning too, and I was learning a lot, and I was motivated, so I was always working hard. But just the amount of little pearls of wisdom that guys would come in the store, guys who worked in the store, just hanging around. I think back on it now, and it was like you were soaking up just music without even knowing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, man. I mean, and when you're that age, though, you're not supposed to know it, right?
Of course. Yeah.
I guess not, but those, I worry for this is going to sound shitty, but I kind of worry for the younger generation.
Yeah.
Because they have, and I'm sure you have the same discussion, like every time you do like one of those clinics or a master class, I'm sure you have the same, I imagine you have a very similar point of view in that we learned in a very visceral way, in really like in the oral folk tradition way,
Mm-hmm.
that had been passed down from generation to generation, crossing over ethnicities, crossing over religions, crossing over all these things. That's how we learned. It gives me goosebumps just to think about how we learned.
100%.
And then like there are these kids, and I'm sure you've seen them. They can come on your gig and play circles around you, play circles around me. And it's astonishing. Like if we had seen someone with that level of facility when we were kids, we probably would have all of our acne would have exploded at one time,
Yeah.
But these guys, and I'm sure you notice the same thing, because the way that they gained their knowledge was not the way that we did. They gained their knowledge almost by uploading it.
Yes.
So it oftentimes just feels so foreign to me. And it's no fault of theirs. It's no
No.
great accomplishment of ours. It's just how the shit is rolling now, you
Oh, yeah,
know?
everybody uses what's available to them, so that's the situation that we're in right now. Number one, they have access to unlimited amounts of knowledge and information. When I was a kid, or when you were a kid and you were learning, if you wanted to figure out what Wes was doing or whatever, or learn how to apply the melodic minor scale, you had to go ask somebody. You know what I mean? You had to go sit down, have it explained to you, fumble through how to use it. Now I can go on YouTube and I'll be using it within 30 seconds. You know what I mean? And it's just a different way. But even more than that, I think you're talking about, there's no on-the-job or practical application for these guys. So they grow technically in this way that's unparalleled now these days. But you and I had the guys giving us stink eye all the time when we didn't know what we were doing. And dude, that was the biggest factor in my constant growth as a kid, was fucking up, getting a dirty look from an older, seasoned musician, and then never making that mistake again, because I wanted nothing but the glance like this from a guy that said, you did it, that was great, and they don't have that.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, and it's that on the job training thing, like you're talking about. And I feel for these guys, and it's no fault of theirs, to have guys like us being like, you suck, Junior. Like, what the fuck are you doing? This is like, as dry, you're playing as drier than a popcorn fart. Why? It's like their reality. I mean, I think about my grandfather, he died a couple years ago at 107, right? So think about what that guy lived through, right? Like, he's a New Yorker, and he lived through, like, New York. He lived on the upper, like, in Washington Heights, when there were still farms there. You know what I mean? Wow. I mean, but then you think about all the stuff he saw and all the changes he saw. But man, compared to you and I and the generation that's 30 years younger than us, I think there's never been on the planet that much of a chasm.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's so much faster now, generationally. Everything moves exponentially faster. Yeah. I'm curious. Around that time when you guys moved to Berkeley, and you're hanging out in the music stores. I don't know when you start taking lessons from Satch. It sounds like you had a group of guys your age who were into like-minded stuff that you hung around with. How much was that a factor in the the amount of effort and pursuit of learning to play? Was that a big part of it? Because I never had guys my age to hang around with.
Yeah, I mean, it was some of both, right? Because the guys that were my age, like at Berkeley High School, and Berkeley was a weird place, like I was asking Christian McBride, like, Philly, man, it was amazing because you guys always went to the high school, and he goes, you Berkeley people are different. It's like you guys, you have the groove, but then you also have this weird intellectual thing, and then you'll play some punk rock music. You know what I mean? And then, so basically Berkeley High, at the time I went to it, like in the early 80s, the jazz band was like Dave Ellis and Josh Redman and Kenny White. I don't know if you play with Kenny White. He's a great drummer. He's in the LA area. Great drummer. So many killing musicians. Half of the Digital Underground went to Berkeley High School. Alex Skolnick was a guy that we used to hang with all the time. Too Short used to come to Berkeley High School with his tapes to sell his tapes. And you had all these heavy duty, like punk rock, I guess they called it hardcore back then, bands. And you had like people like Pharoah Sanders lived in Berkeley, would just be playing in the park. You know what I mean? So the younger people that I would hang with, there was so much guitar information, and like you hang with Jay Lane, the great drummer, and it was really interesting because my inclination was like to be an asshole and try to find the music that I thought was the best shit and lord that over everyone else's shit. And Jay Lane was like, "Nah, you're wrong, man. You're wrong." And he's like, and he was right. And forever, he's like, "You're wrong, man. That's not. Look, we're gonna go see this country guy play, and I'm gonna show you all the dope shit that he's got going on, or we're gonna see this. So there were so many people my age, but it was like we didn't have like a very specific like agenda. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Everyone kind of liked different music, and you had to learn how to be like, oh shoot, like let's go see the. And there was a place in Berkeley then called Ruthie's Inn, which was on San Pablo, and it was historically it was a chitlin circuit club historically, so you could go see Albert King and Buddy Guy and like Coco Taylor and people like that there. And the dude who owned it, this guy Wes Robinson, his son was a skater. And so this is like the early 80s, and they wouldn't have anything going on like Monday through Thursday, right? Or Sunday through Thursday, whatever. And his son was like, "Dad, I know all these cool bands you got to start booking in your place." So he started booking bands like Fishbone and Bad Brains and the Dead Kennedys and all this other like kind of, and the club was filled all the time, right? So all of this stuff was going on around the same time, and you had to kind of, but you would find, and I found my niche in that I was really into like 50s music, and I was into Guitar Slim, and well, of course, like you said, Magic Sam, and then Chuck Berry, and a lot of the rockabilly stuff too. So I ended up getting gigs with people who were our age then,
Yeah.
who really knew how to play this shit. So, and like you said, like the older guy looking at you like this, and I thought I was hot shit, and really I was almost medium shit, almost mild. I was not spicy. But anyway, we did have a group of people, and it was really great because it was not just one thing that everyone was into. So you got a real knowledge base. I mean, I remember when one of my friends bought the Message, the Grandmaster Flash record, and we had just finished listening to like Cliff Gallup for like 3 hours. And my friend said, "Check this record out." And he put on the Message, and that was it. And I get chills even thinking about hearing that record for the very first time.
Wow. Yeah.
I know I'm wandering, but anyway, that's what growing up in Berkeley will do to you, I think.
Yeah. I mean, but it's such a
That
diverse...
and all the acid.
Well, it's such a diverse setting, but I mean that was the whole reason for it, I guess. It was, a freewheeling open place for people to be themselves and explore and do all those things. Did you have any people showing you anything, or are you picking up everything on your own at that
time? No, everybody played, which I'm sure it was similar for you in Florida where you were, right? Like everybody kind of played.
Nobody my age played. And if they did, it was, heavy metal peak time. So anybody my age who played guitar only cared about heavy metal. So yeah, that was like my biggest frustration, and maybe part of the reason I've ended up where I am, because it forced me to seek out outlets to play, and it was always with old guys. And, maybe if I would have found young guys to play with, I would have ended up in a different place than I am now,
I think definitely, because that's the thing. You have that older, what's the word I'm looking for? Aesthetic,
Maybe. Yeah.
Aesthetic is that's too superficial of a word, but you know what I'm saying? You have that imprinted, and dude, that's the real shit. That's what you give to the next generation.
Yeah. So you had a bunch of guys. Everybody played, and I guess you're egging each other on, kind of. You're trading secrets, basically. Hey, show me this, I'll show you that.
Yeah, totally. And everybody, like the Berkeley High Jazz Band, I was like the third string. I didn't even make it.
Okay.
And there was a guy who was Orthodox. He was Orthodox Jewish guy. And he was really good. This cat named David Markowitz. I remember his playing because he could comp like a motherfucker. Like he was great. And they said, "Well, you know what, man? if he can't make a gig like on the Sabbath or whatever, we'll let you. But they said that knowing that they were never ever going to play Friday after sundown to Saturday. So they knew. And then my other friend, Eric Dinwiddie, was the other guitar player, and he had a band called the Uptones, which at that time in the Bay Area, they were really big. They kind of influenced a bunch of bands like Green Day and Rancid and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
And anyway, but everybody took guitar lessons from Joe Satriani, and he was just the local guitar teacher. So, you know, you would all take lessons from him, and then you'd all get together, and he had shown everybody something different. You know, like he didn't give a damn about, he didn't have an agenda. He didn't have a, well, let's say this, he had an agenda, and his agenda was he was damned if you were going to take lessons from him and not learn how to physically navigate the instrument, you know? But other than that, it was just like, oh, okay, what do you want to learn? You want to learn James Brown? Cool. All right, I'm gonna show you this. Or do you want to learn this subject? Because dude, that dude has a much broader musical experience than his resume would let you think he does. You know, and he kicked our asses. You know. So everybody would just be like, okay, did he show you this? No, he didn't. Okay, what did he show you? You know, we'd sit in the hallways and everyone would pass the guitar around and, you know, that kind of vibe, you know?
Well, that's great. He didn't have a syllabus, you know. He just had you like everybody coming in and working on what they wanted to work on while still giving them fundamentals, you know. That's the best.
Yeah.
That's the mark of a great teacher.
But he also was kind of, he was kind of zen in his approach, because he would find some shit he knew you were weak at and then give you something that was really cool that would excite you so you could work on it.
Yeah, wow.
You know?
Wow.
And dude, he took me like, I mean, I guess I was pretty good at that age, and I was a bit of a fuck up too. Like it was kind of like he was if I didn't have that guy to kind of like put me in my place, you know what I mean? And get me excited and interested about following this path. Like that was the first time in my life that something clicked. Like, wait a minute, if I play this guitar for 6 hours, at the end of the 6 hours, I'm going to know the solo to Sultans of Swing, you know? And I'd be like, okay, that's amazing, you know? And that clicked. So he kind of took me under his wing, and he would take me to all these gigs, you know? And he took me to his band. He had a band called the Squares that played. And he took me to see Alan Holdsworth when I was like 14. And it was at the Keystone Berkeley, bro. And I was like, the front row, these giant Marshall amps. I'd never heard anything like this, man. I was totally blown away and also mystified. I'm sure I looked like a cow watching a train go by, you know?
And that's pretty fucking hip. How long did you take lessons from him?
Not that long, really. A couple years, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
Because it came to a point where he was like, you know what? You have a specific direction you need to go in. And basically, like, all the stuff I'm showing you now, it's not going to really help you. So you need to go and you need to dig into these records. You need to find your own direction, kind of this way, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Man, sounds like a really centered, grounded guy. I don't know him. I never met him at all.
Oh, you don't know him? Oh,
No.
man, he's a really good dude.
Yeah. Yeah, seems like it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So when did gigs start happening for you? Was it around that time?
Yeah, you know, I started playing, and like I had my own little rockabilly band called the Grease Monkeys. And so we did gigs, the Grease Monkeys, right?
Yeah.
And then from that, I started to get gigs with older guys, all kinds of things, like playing 50s music in weddings, playing like Motown stuff, which was a challenge for me because of the harmonic stuff. I was kind of clueless, you know. And then various and sundry things, just played with a lot of different kind of people, you know.
Yeah. when did you know? Because we all have that moment. When did you know, like, this was it? Like, this was your path? And, you know, I don't know. Did you go to college at all? I don't know the answer to that.
No,
No.
I mean, I went to Laney College in Oakland, which it was a great community college actually. And I went there for about a year and I took, like arranging and theory and a
Oh,
bunch of stuff. And there were great teachers there, Elvo DeMonte and Ed Kelly, who were kind of like two real Bay Area heavy dudes. You know, I think the Tower of Power guys took from both of them, and it was a heavy, really cool experience. But you know, just a junior college. I mean, I really didn't have any money. I didn't have any grades, and I didn't. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing because I did because my mom was so brilliant, but there just was never a point where it was just like, oh, how do I apply to college? Like I didn't even understand that process. Like I was such a street guy. Like I didn't. What do you do? You have to fill out some shit and take a test. And I was barely going to high school, you know, so I didn't
yeah.
really could do that. But you know, and I think I was about 16 or something when I was like, this is like the best thing ever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that 100%. And it was, you know, my parents were super supportive. My grandparents, you know, Jewish family, my grandparents were not very happy about me not
Yeah.
going to college. Because it was pretty much determined by the time I was 16, I wasn't going to college. You know, I mean, I was
Yeah.
gigging so much, and you know, I just knew what I wanted to do, and they were not happy. But my parents were always really supportive. Your parents, I mean, like you said, your mom's really brilliant. Your dad's, you know, they're hippies too, though. What did they feel? What was their opinion when you know they realized this was going to be your life?
Um, it's the same with me. Like I had Jewish grandparents as well from my mom's side, right?
Okay.
And they're just their mentality is like, you know, I'm sure it was similar with yours, you know. And I didn't even grow up in the religion or anything like that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But you know, they're like, man, our parents came from the old countries. They worked in the needle trades all day, like
Yeah.
never saw the sunlight, and we they did all this so that, you know, we could get a little further ahead, and then we busted our ass so you could a little further ahead, and now this is what you're gonna do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. I think a similar kind of thing, honestly. But my mom, she was like, whatever, you know, she was fine. I mean, what's she gonna do? She was a real, um, kind of black sheep, not black sheep, but she definitely was iconoclastic. You know,
Yeah.
she had her own path that she walked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
So what can
if
she
I got,
say?
yeah, well, what can she say? But if I got too out of order with shit, which I did, she would let me know, you know. And then if I got even too out of order for her, then the police came and I got to be a part of the big brother, you know, the big brothers, big sisters thing. I had a
Sure.
big brother, which was awesome. It just so turned out my big brother was like a pot smoking hippie Jew intellectual,
Really?
you know.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was, I got really lucky, man, you know, really lucky with all that stuff. But you know, man, at that point, it's just like, oh, you're doing something creative and productive that occupies the majority of your time. This is a good thing. Continue.
It's amazing how it comes full circle too. Like, you know, I'm sure your grandparents dealt with it with your mom. You know how they
Yeah,
deal with that, and she's got to deal somewhat with you. Also, not be hypocritical because of what she's gone through, and let you do your thing. And I mean, on some level, my son, you know, he's a more successful than I've ever been. He's an actor. He's been in a lot of
yeah,
cool stuff, and at first I was kind of really ambivalent against the him being an actor thing. But he made it very clear, even as a really young kid, how much he enjoyed it. And I started to realize, wait a minute. I knew how much I enjoyed what I was doing when I was 10, 11, 12. It would be the most hypocritical thing for me to say to my son, oh, you can't possibly know what you want to do, you know, as a
yeah,
kid.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
No, I feel the same thing, and you know, like with my kids, it's, you know, you just, it's natural as a parent. You worry about your kids. You hate to see them making the same mistakes you made. stuff like that. You know, I mean, I just think it's just pretty basic for parents to
Yeah.
do that, kind of have that thought, you know.
Yeah. Man, so all right, so you're playing gigs, the Grease Monkeys. You're playing gigs with other bands, '50s bands at different things. Um, when does it become like self sufficient? When does it become like your real job where you're starting to find a lane for yourself?
Yeah, well, you know, I kind of when I was about 19, I didn't really have any prospects. I was just working like jobs, you know, moving furniture, actually digging ditches, like stuff like that, you know. And you know, just not in a great place in my life, you know. And a friend of mine, this French dude who moved to the States for high school. Um, Interesting. He's an LA guy. He was one of the first guys we knew to save up his money and get a computer, and he started doing animation on it. This is back in like the early to mid '80s, right? And then he was working for Sony ImageWorks for years, doing all like he did like Polar Express and all
Oh
those
wow.
kinds of movies, like heavyweight dude. But at the time, he was like, "Look, man, I'm going to France because my sister's apartment in Paris is going to be free for a month. So if you can save enough money, you know, you can come and stay there for a month and get started, and you could play on the streets over there." So I did. I saved up enough money. I got a mouse amplifier, and I remember I had a George Benson 10. Remember those Ibanez guitars?
Absolutely, GB10. Yeah.
And, yeah, and I went to Europe and I had way too much stuff because you do that when you're like 19 years old. You carry way too much shit. And by the time I got there, her place was great. It was like 120 square feet or something, you know. And so I was there for a month. It gave me a head start. I learned to play on the streets. I met all these incredible people, you know, that are still my friends today. People from Africa, people from Caribbean, people who Roma people, Americans, Canadians, Swedes.
Wow.
And over the course of 3 years, I mean, it was rough the first kind of 6 months where I didn't really know how to do it. I was playing on the cars and the metro and learning how to do it. But man, I was a street musician for like 3 years, playing like honestly, man, 12 hours a day, like just playing all the time.
Mm.
And I made when we finally got to Zurich, Switzerland, we actually started to make good money, man. You know, like actual money. And I mean, I did that. After that, I went back to Berkeley because I wanted to learn a little more. I went to the Laney College, like I said, and then I was working at Subway Guitars. I was teaching guitar. I don't know how qualified I was to do that, but I guess I was doing it. And at that time, Michael Franti worked there, Alvin Young, Bud Hart worked there, and Alex Skolnick worked there.
Yeah.
It's a little place. We all worked there together, so we had this nice community. And Michael Franti had just gotten a record contract, and he was like, "Hey, man, do you want to tour with my band?" And I was like, "I don't know, bro. Like, you know, we were doing duo stuff." Um, but he has his band. It was like, I don't know. I'm trying to learn how to play like Joe Pass. I don't know if I can like do this stuff, you know. But you know, so I was in that band for a couple years touring, and then after that, I mean, that's how you know I made my living. And then after I quit that band, and then started playing kind of with my own groups around the Bay Area, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't know, probably 20,
Wow.
22. But then I always had shitty jobs in between because I would make a choice like, this isn't the music I really want to play. So I'm going to have to downgrade my economic situation and get a job doing whatever so that I can practice and take my thing hopefully to the next level, you know?
When do you start writing tunes?
Mm, man, I mean, I think all the time I was writing a little bit here, a little, I'd get like a shitty little sad melody in my head that I thought was the best thing since Swiss cheese. Write too many chord changes around it. You know what I
Of
mean?
course. Uh huh.
Um, but then when I got with Jay Lane and Dave Ellis, we had a really fun trio, and the Bay Area was just popping at that time, man. It was like the energy was in the air. We had such a scene there, man. I mean, and the music just kind of wrote itself, honestly, man. It
Hmm.
just, I didn't do anything special. You know, I
Right.
just came and I just threw it out there. We had tunes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, even before you started playing the instruments you play now, do you feel like something was kind of pointing you that way a lot of the time? Was it part of playing by yourself on the street a lot? The music that you like and love, the different styles and the melding of that? You know, was something pointing you there, or was there like just an
Mm.
absolute pivot moment?
You know, it's exactly right. The first, like, slowly, all the music I came up around, playing on the street, you know, having to sometimes be self-sufficient. And also I got really into Tuck Andrus around that time.
Mm,
This is kind of like late 80s. And that shit tilted the axis for me, man. That completely changed my whole way of thinking. But it also, unbeknownst to me, I think, at least consciously, it was part of a continuum, you know, that like all that Blind Blake stuff and
yeah,
Robert Johnson and Joseph Spence, you know, Joe Pass, Tuck Andrus, it all is a part of a continuum, you know.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so that I think kind of started that germ happening. And then also another part of the whole continuum was, you know, I grew up in playing a lot of drums and a lot of bass. I mean, when I was first a street musician, I started playing with this group, and the guitar players were too good. So they're like, dude, you can play bass. And they provided the bass, and it was a K plywood bass.
Mm,
I think the action was like that high.
yeah.
I'd never played acoustic bass. Maybe once or twice I fucked with one, but nothing big. Before I knew it, I'm out there. My hands are turning into hamburger. I
Of
have
course
my
they are.
fingers
Yeah.
taped up. You know, I didn't know what I was doing, you know. Um, Thankfully, the music wasn't super challenging and I could actually execute like the stuff, you know. But but it was just all part of a continuum, you know, and I got a Fat Dog at Subway. There was an old Vega archtop guitar that had like a wider neck. And I was like, man, I really want to play 7-string. Like, for some reason, I just wanted to have that extra low note, you know?
Mm,
And I guess it was just a sound I was hearing. And then he's like, well, we can make one out of this, you know? So they made me kind of this guitar. And then I connected with Ralph Novak a couple years later, who was also a Bay Area guy. And anyway, and that's when my misery began.
do you remember what the first gig, you know, without a bass player? Do you remember it?
Man, well, I was doing a lot of duo stuff with Michael Franti on the 7-string.
Mm,
So that kind of prepared me in a way. But you know, you've done those gigs where you're also kind of really having to provide a lot of rhythm, the
yeah.
counterpoint,
Yeah.
even some backbeat kind of stuff. That's different than playing with a drummer.
Oh yeah,
And
it's totally different. Yeah.
totally different. And then when I started playing, it was with Jay Lane, who's just one of the baddest motherfuckers. I mean, he's the guy who, when we were 14, he got that 777 record and was like, check this out. I learned how to play this beat. You know what I mean? And he's just and super musical and pocket for days. I mean, I just like feel like I almost owe him an apology every year for dealing with my sad ass, you know, for those
Oh man.
first couple years that I was learning it. And you know, he and Dave and I, that was really when I really started to do it. And it was really helpful that I got to learn how to do it with someone like him that had that much pocket, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, you know, I was doing a lot of regular guitar gigs at the time as well, but at that point it kind of took off. And honestly, man, I wasn't really good. And then I was just fucked because I had a career doing it. And then I had to like double down. And then I started realizing, shit, I have a career at this thing and it's nearly impossible. Like, what did I do? Why am I doing this with my life? You know?
Right.
And then it just slowly turned into something where you could just play something more chill but you remember that time, right? You remember like
Yes.
the early 90s to the mid 90s, maybe late 90s, where chops were at a premium, right?
Yes.
You remember playing gigs then?
Absolutely. I remember playing. I mean, there was. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot going on. When I first heard you, it was like I was less taken. Not that I wasn't blown away by the fact that you were playing both things at the same time, but if someone wouldn't have told me that, I was more impressed by the music itself, like what you were choosing to play, and the
Oh
grooves
man,
going
thank you.
on. You know, like that because it was like a breath of fresh air compared to what was going on at the time.
Oh wow, I appreciate it, man. I mean, the funny thing is, the whole time I was always thinking like, man, if I don't play all my shit, they're gonna ask for their money back, you know?
Well, yeah, especially in the audiences you're playing in front of, the rooms you were going to, the label you end up on. You know, they're expecting, a
Yeah,
blower. You know what I mean? Yeah, without question.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
was just like, man, I hear some of that stuff, I'm just like, wow. Maybe if I played a quarter of the amount of notes and my groove was stronger. But look, man, you can't. It's all part of the evolution, you know. And you can't just be like, I'm gonna practice for another 10 years and then take my shit out to the world. It doesn't work like that. The world is part
no,
of that equation.
yeah, yeah. Well, dude, I remember from your first records, and then you did the Natty Dread record.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When I heard that, I felt like when Lively Up Yourself came on, it was like, because to me, the way you treated the tune and the Leslie and the whole thing, it was like, whoa. I felt like, wow, you had taken it to another level because you were playing simpler than ever. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And it
right
blew
on,
me
man.
away. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I just came to that point where it's just like, okay, what do you want to do here? You know? So basically that started that thing that I know you went down that same fucking road where you're like, okay, let's start putting heavier and heavier strings on the instrument to
Fuck yeah.
not
Yeah.
allow for that kind of shenanigans, you know?
Yeah. Did you? I mean, you knowingly did that, right? You were handcuffing yourself to some degree.
I think so, you know, and also like I just started to realize just like I guess it's just part of the evolution. We all go through it. You know, you're like when you're young, when you're a young man, you're like 22, 23, you're just like you're like a fire burning in every direction. And there is
Hmm.
if you aren't the highest urine spot on the fire hydrant, you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? I think there's that energy, and I think you kind of have to go through that. And
For sure.
you know, and I kind of feel for people who I don't know how you feel about this because we both of us know a lot of like really kind of famous star people, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
and you and I are not those people. We're like maybe maybe more people like we're just like above the postman in terms of celebrity, right? Just a
Right.
few more
Exactly.
people know us than know the postman. So
Exactly.
we have a lot of latitude to do lots of different shit. Those
Hmm.
people we know that are big stars, man, it's just like talk about the scrutiny they face. And, you know, someone comes to see them, they expect that specific thing every time. And it's
Yeah.
like, man, you're 60 years old playing music you played when you were 25. I mean, that's so hard, man. I just can't
Yeah.
imagine trying to play the shit I was playing when I was 25. I'd have a aneurysm, you know?
Man, when did you feel like? I mean, this is a loaded question, but do you remember like feeling like it clicked at a certain point for you personally? Like all of a sudden it all lined up and like, wow, now I'm not just like flying by the seat of my pants and like you said, having to invent it as you go along. When it became just like I found it. Like this is now I'm in it. Like what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm doing it the way I hear it.
Well, not yet. And I'm being honest. I really am. You know, it's a matter of really trying to I'm getting there though, you know, and I keep trying. It's really more like coming to terms with what the instrument wants to do
Hmm.
and and meeting it there, you know, like it's much, you know, more like for can you hear that?
Yeah.
So, you know, back in the day, I'd always want to play something like super like fast and crazy with as much shit. But now I realize I'm just like, man, I think I like just doing shit that's just like You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And dude, but 20 years ago, I wouldn't be caught dead playing something like that was that intentional, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
but you know the thing, right? You come to the point where it's just like, okay, I gotta really come to terms with what this instrument wants to do, you know?
sure. And I know, and I know you, through your experience and level of, knowledge, you're hearing a lot of stuff all the time, like we all are. I know you're
Yeah,
hearing it. So it becomes, like you said, intentional what you're doing. You're making choices and playing in like a more, not streamlined, because I don't like it when it's all less is more and all that. No, it's really what
right.
you're feeling and hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
In spite of all the knowledge you have.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, I think this year has afforded me the ability to like time to play a lot of drums, a lot of percussion, play a bunch of bass on things, and then even playing like just straight up regular guitar in this organ group has been a real learning thing because
Mm,
it's a certain kind of freedom that this instrument doesn't provide.
of course.
So it shows me like, okay, you don't need to go for that on this instrument because you're not going to get it. So
Right.
don't go for it.
Interesting. Huh.
You know,
Wow, man. Wow.
I don't
Well,
know. It's just a weird thing, Josh.
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you have it's your thing, so you have this close relationship, and who knows how you feel about it every day. Whether
Yeah.
I don't know how you look at it. Do you look down and go like, yeah, this is my thing, or do you just feel like a guitar player who adapted into this other thing? I don't know how you view it from inside.
That is really a fucking great question that has never been asked. And it's very prescient because I feel like because it was my career move, I had to put so much of that intensity into it, you know? And you know how it is, especially when you're young, like you want to plant your flag, you want to let your
Fuck
plant
yeah.
your fucking flag, right? Otherwise, why are you doing it, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but it's taken me a long time, and I think I'm just starting to realize that it's part of a continuum. Like the drums, bass, like regular guitar, percussion, and this instrument, they're all, to me, it's all part of a continuum. Like they're all, and each one does, like, it's like looking at a graph where, like, well, what does this thing really excel at? And you see
Hmm.
each one, and this thing, the more I play it and the more I play other shit, the more I realize that this thing really has the job of, if you're doing it right, nobody notices.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think for us as guitar players, musicians, that's a really hard place to get to.
Yeah, yeah. And without question, you just stated the most impressive thing about what you do to me is the times that I've listened to you or especially seen you live, and for moments, long, extended moments, not even thought about what you're doing and how ridiculous it is, motherfucker, and just been
Ah,
like,
get out.
just in it. You know what I mean? Because it disappears. Because it's just music, and it's like, dude, that's I think the most mind blowing thing about you.
Oh man, thank you. And that's encouraging to me because that's what I'm trying to work on. Like for instance, I just did this record with Corey Fonville and DJ Harrison. And man, where those guys hear the time, it's on such a high level. And where they hear the groove and where they put it, the quarter note, that's the future. These guys are like 30 years old or something. And
Mm.
the way they hear it's so like it really made me reinvestigate my shit. Like feeling like, man, I'm bunching up my quarter notes too much. I need to open them up a little bit more, you
Wow,
know?
wow.
And that fucked my head up. It was like the same thing as when I played with D'Angelo and Questlove back on that Voodoo thing. I thought I was the neatest fucking thing since Swiss cheese, and it's like
Sure.
96 or 97. And I went in there and I'm just like, nah, I'm not even fucking Velveeta at this point, man. You know?
It was. Were you with around Raphael during any of those sessions, or did you guys never cross on that stuff?
The crazy messed up thing is we're from the same area.
Sure.
And I realized, and I knew one of the Wiggins guys because we used to hang out in the same guitar store all the time. So we would just be playing guitar and whatever. But I started hitting on Blue Note at the same time that Tony, I think, got big.
Sure.
And so we were never in town at the same time to like meet each other and hang. And I remember always thinking, man, I have to go hang with these guys. I have to meet Jubu and I have to go make this hang, like what the hell? And then I think right when I was about to start hanging out with those guys, I moved to New York. You know what I mean? But his name rang out.
Sure. Yeah, but so
what was it
never,
like playing? You played with him for a while, right?
Oh yeah, I played with him for years. Yeah, I mean it was, speaking of Jubu, so when I got called by Raphael, he was calling me for what I do well, which was he was getting ready to put out these records that were more Motown and Stax, and that's a bag that I'm very comfortable in and that I've done my homework in. So that's why I got hired for the gig. But then there was all these other tunes we had to play that were Jubu parts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was not my bag. So it was.
It is now
mind blowing to dive into Jubu, and then get to know Jubu too, and play some gigs with him and be around him. I actually realized, not even knowing it, that when I first moved to LA, Jubu was literally one of the first fucking people I ever met, and I had no idea who he was. We played together at a blues jam. We had both just moved to LA, and yeah, I had no idea who he was. Absolutely no idea. And we would see each other around town, and it wasn't until I started playing with Raphael that I realized that's the same guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Talk about a treasure. He's a fucking treasure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's really incredible, that guy. And that comes back to me to that guitar vernacular.
Yeah.
And there's so much knowledge that's passed down, obviously, from generation to generation. There's so much of that, what people used to call gospel guitar, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you grow up in the Bay Area, you're going to get everything else as well. So it's all in there. And it's really like, he's another one of those guys that when you hear him, it's really hard to ignore because it has that balance of the visceral and the intellectual.
Yep, 100%. 100%.
And like Isaiah Sharkey, he's a buddy of both of ours, and he's coming from that universe as well, in many ways, and there's just something about that kind of guitar playing that to me is just kind of like, what is the guitar supposed to do, Josh, right? Like what is it supposed to do, right? And you think about people that use the guitar to its fullest, like someone like Charlie Patton or Blind Blake or Joseph Spence or Blind Willie Johnson. You think about like, well, what is the guitar supposed to do? And you hear guys like that play, and you go, okay, well, they figured that out. They figured, and there's just something about, like, I could listen to that all day. I could listen to Cornell Dupree like all day and still be like, wow.
I do listen to it all day. I listen every day. Every day I listen to Cornell Dupree or Charlie Patton, or fucking Lonnie Johnson or B.B. King or Albert. It's all I do is listen to those guys. It's been the story of my entire life, and like you said, what's the guitar do? They all found what's been most inspiring to me about it, my whole process and path is every one of those guys that we love. I just hear, when I listen to all of them, I hear that they found what it was supposed to do for them. I hear just honesty. That's it. Yeah. The main thing I hear is, whoa. Like when I listen to Johnny Guitar Watson, You know, it's like, fuck, he's playing at the best of his ability with the best tone he could have gotten and the gear he could have gotten, the most individualism he could have got, while also
Yeah.
still making obvious that he listened to Guitar Slim and BB King,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's so honest to me that that's been the number one goal of all time for me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I hear it, man, when you play, and
Well,
it's that kind of, deep. We get what we get from our surroundings, right?
sure.
And then you got to do that kind of deep dive into all this other stuff. And I know sometimes, man, I just was not ready. You know what I mean? I wasn't ready to deal with Charlie Patton, because that's what my mom was playing around the house. I'm just like, I don't need to hear this.
Yeah.
I need to hear, John Scofield or I'm not ready for this right now. And then there came a time when
I was backwards 100% to you. I was listening to that or listening to Otis Rush or whatever, and then I heard Robin, and I was like, I don't want this. I don't want to hear Robin and John Scofield. They're not bending enough fucking strings for me, or it's too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird. Crazy.
Yeah, but
Meanwhile,
I mean, we all. Yeah.
Did you see Robin in the Bay Area a decent amount?
I did not, man. Because it was an age thing.
Okay.
I think he moved to LA
Yeah.
before I kind of came of age.
Sure. Yeah.
But the Bay Area people that I did get to play with that were maybe even a little older than Robin, like guys like Mike Clark, who's kind of been a big influence and a teacher for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a guy like Eddie Marshall, who was a great Bay Area drummer at the time. And there were a bunch of older kind of Bay Area people that were part of that, I guess, whatever you wanted to call that kind of East Bay kind of scene.
Sure.
They taught me to play ahead of the beat and make sure every 16th note was played at all times.
Oh, man. That's some East Bay. Did you ever cross with Bruce Foreman up there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but he's older than me.
Sure, yeah.
But he was, I think he's probably about 15, 20 years older, but boy, he was just like,
yeah.
I mean, he's still the guy,
Oh, yeah, he's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish that I had gotten lessons with him, but I don't think
I do about one every year or two with him. I'll just go, and it's not a lesson. We're friends, so we hang, but I make sure to every now and then make it clear to him, I don't want to hang. Show me something, because he's the best teacher I've ever met. Like, he's an insane teacher, besides being the best fucking bebop guitar player walking the planet. He's a special cat. Special cat. Yeah.
Yeah, he sure is. It's the only other guy that I think that I played with that has that kind of feel, like, who's like really was a jazz guitar player, was Ernest Ranglin. And dude, he's like people don't think this about him, because usually the milieu they're used to hearing him in is either, he plays like with acoustic bass or like a jazz trio, but it's usually in a reggae situation or something like that. Man, he's one of those guys that's like, he was like the house guitar player at Ronnie Scott's for a while. Mm. And he's one of those guys that, like, Scott Amendola's grandfather, Tony Gattuso, like, they know all of the changes for all of the songs from when they came out. None of our bullshit that we try to put on them. Yeah. Like, they know the actual shit, Yeah.
Crazy. Dude, before we get into the 10 questions, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit more about the D'Angelo, because people are always interested in it. So you never crossed with Ray during those sessions? He wasn't there when you did any of your stuff?
No, I wish I had met him. I met Greg Fillinganes and, Russ Elevato, who was engineering it, of course, and D'Angelo and Questlove. And the manager at the time, Dominic, but I didn't really meet anybody else, I don't think.
Interesting. Because I've asked Raphael a lot about he doesn't like to talk actually about the Voodoo record and that stuff. So it's not easy to get him to talk about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've never gotten a straight story for him on it, other than he'll talk about Untitled, you know, and how it was to him like a joke how far back they could put the bass. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
you know what's funny, man? People are always like, "Oh man, how?" You know, those like young drummers will come up and we'll be well, they'll play it, and they'll want to play something like that, and they'll be, and I'm like, just so you know, I can't play like that. That was Pro Tools.
Yeah, they changed. They got everybody with that. Everybody.
Yeah, they did, man. They did. And I remember, you know what's so funny is like I had a cassette tape of those sessions, and my band was on tour at the time, and I said, man, you guys got to check this shit out. This is pretty fucking dope. And I remember playing them those sessions. They're like, oh man, this is killer. And then when the record came out, a friend of mine called me up. He was like, man, they fucked your shit up, bro. That shit sounds terrible, man.
Amazing. Oh man. But yeah, change fucking music. Change music. Unreal.
Yeah. The avant-garde, really, honestly.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is about that stuff too is I think people, like you said, drummers just automatically go to the certain place. If you really pay attention, it's the bass. I mean, Quest is pretty straight on that record, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to have something as a guidepost to make the other stuff have impact.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have that right on the beat thing going on, when you have the bass playing pretty far behind,
Yeah.
it's going to lose impact, you know?
No, 100%. 100%. Did you know when that was going down? Did you just think, oh, this is killing, and you left? You probably, did you know it was going to be like a big fucking deal?
No idea. None.
No idea. Yeah.
I mean, it was just another thing to do at that time. And I was so busy then because I had records out on Blue Note and I was touring and, you know.
Oh, yeah. Like when that record
oh,
came out, it was a big deal that you were on it. Like you were, it was known like, oh, Charlie Hunter's on the record. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
Really?
Fuck yes.
Oh.
I remember clear as day when that record came out and me and my friends talking about it. Like, dude, did you hear Charlie Hunter's going to be on the new D'Angelo record? Yeah.
Oh,
100%. Yeah.
Wow. I guess it's just one of those things, you know. But in hindsight, I have to say I learned a lot from it, from the experience, you know. And I think, and it has opened some doors for me as well. I won't deny that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Amazing, man. All right, let's jump into the 10 questions.
Cool.
Number 1, when you first started learning guitar, do you remember the first like riff or tune or chord change that when you got it under your fingers, it was like the hook was set, the spark was lit, no going back. Like, I can't believe I got this. I figured this out.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it was that, it's going to sound crazy, but at the time that tune was really famous, the Sultans of Swing by the Dire Straits.
Yeah.
And when I learned that solo, I was like, yeah. Like I had climbed Mount Everest in my 13-year-old mind, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. And actually, you're not the first person to say that that's the tune. You know,
really?
In these interviews that I've done. No, not at all. Not at all.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fucking,
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, then that's the answer to number 2 then, which is what's the first solo you ever learned note for note?
Yeah.
It's a fucking unbelievable solo. It's unreal.
It really is. It really
is. It's so musical.
Yep. Yeah. And I bet you and I can both sing it note for note right now if someone
note
made
for
us.
note. Note for note.
Yep.
You know, and
absolutely.
I think guys don't even realize when you learn a solo like that, especially at a foundational time, how much music you're actually learning. How much you're learning to play through some changes that, yeah, they're diatonic, but still, it's not a blues. You're playing through some stuff. You're spelling some stuff out. You're doing some technical things. Like, you learn a lot from learning that solo.
Yep. And it's so cool to hear you say that because that's how, like when people ask me about, oh, this instrument, how hard it must be. I'm just like, well, yeah, it's hard in certain ways, but they're like, do you have any exercises? I'm just like, no, man, just learn a James Brown groove. Because if you just learn something like, if you just like, You know, if you learn that,
Yeah.
you will set yourself up to learn like 2,000 other similar tunes.
Dude, you're so right. Like, if you want to work on groove and play that stuff, just fucking learn James Brown. If you want to learn to play through changes, it doesn't mean you automatically have to start playing All of Me or Giant Steps or whatever.
Yeah.
Fucking learn a Ray Charles song and listen to the way Fathead plays through the changes on
Woo!
something very simple like that. It'll take you
Yeah.
60% further overnight. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'll never forget that Fathead thing. Just like, wow, that's so
Yep.
deep.
When I heard that, literally he on Hard Times he takes half a solo and Ray takes the second half, but that first half was like it was like I'd been given the key to the universe when I learned
Yeah.
that da 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 boom ba 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 da boom ba ba da da ba da 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 ba da 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 to the four, and it was like fuck, I can play through any song now, like with that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so true.
All right.
It's so true.
Number 3, what's the first thing you play? And I guess it's different now because you pick up this instrument, but when you pick up a guitar, or maybe it's different between the guitar and that instrument, do your hands just go somewhere automatically on autopilot?
Yeah, I think so. I think I always go somewhere to just find, like, I'll start with like a bass, a kind of a bass thing first, right? Like, I'll just do some little shit like that, you know, and it's always like I'm thinking about a root note. Usually my first finger hits it, and then I just kind of take it from there, you know.
And if you pick up a 6-string, what is your first
I
thought?
always, every damn time, I always try to play some Blind Blake shit and always end up embarrassing myself.
What key do you do the Blind Blake shit in?
C.
Of course. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, how insane all the open C stuff is that these guys used to play, and how it's a lost art. It's such a lost art.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. And you think about what those guys were doing, like their guitars were stretched to the far reaches of what they were capable of, sound that they were capable of producing.
Oh yeah.
They're playing at the bridge to just punch as hard as they can. I just, dude, I would give anything to be even just 5 minutes in like a dance that Blind Blake played, or just to see Joseph Spence play.
Oof.
You know?
Yeah.
And to hear what that really sounds like, you know?
I couldn't imagine.
I shouldn't wish for too much. I'm knocking on wood now.
Dude, I couldn't imagine.
I don't want to make a golem.
I couldn't imagine being in that situation and hearing that like to hear Big Bill Brunsey or something like that, like
Woo!
what it would be like, you know, like in a room, like you'd have to just be in a little room. Yeah, I think back to like, you know, Son House or Robert Johnson playing gigs, which obviously they did. What really was that fucking like? I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Oh, hang on.
There we go.
You should come back now. Sorry.
Yep. All right. Number 4. I probably have a good idea of what your answer will be to this, but what groove, key, style just kind of always lives in there when you're on, you know, idle? It's like for me, obviously I'm when I'm cooking eggs, when I'm driving, if I'm not listening to music, there's pretty much a shuffle going on in my head most of the time. Like I'm hearing
That's
a shuffle and I'm blowing over it in my head.
Yeah.
For you, is it like
Yeah.
more of a straight eighth note thing? What do you hear all the time?
Man, that's a great question. I think usually what I'm hearing is probably like, you know, I'm hearing some vibe like that, you know, and maybe sometimes it's a shuffle for sure. And then sometimes it's like a, you know, like a kind of a second line vibe. It's either like a shuffle, a second line vibe, or some really stinky kind of Mike Clark feel, you know?
Do you ever pay attention to like what the first thing is you hear when a piece of music comes on that you've never listened to before? Where do you go first?
Like you're talking about, like if you hear something for the
Yeah,
very first time.
well, I go through periods. So like when I listen to music for the first time, something comes on I never heard. I have like three thought processes. One is from my time doing a lot of sessions. Normally, it's what would I have played or what would I add to what's here. You know what I mean? But as
Yeah,
in parts
yeah,
plan. The second one is like analyzing always the groove first, like what's going on the groove. And then the main one is I just normally start blowing over whatever it is in my head. Some sort of improv is going on, you know. But I've been
yeah.
trying to come more cognizant of which is the first thing that I think of when a piece of music comes on, you know.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, for sure, it's the drums.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Everything begins and ends with the drums for me. That's how, when I'm playing with someone, even like if I'm just playing regular guitar, it's always about the drums.
Yeah.
I have to I have to be connected with the drummer's feel and their beat, whatever their beat is. I have to get into that and deal with that in terms of like, hey, this person has this really cool beat, and how can I not fuck this up? You know, how can I get in there and groove with them so we can create something really cool together from a groove standpoint? So for me, it's always the drums, man. I always hear the drums first, you know.
Interesting. Yeah. I believe it.
Even if it's someone who's just playing kit, 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 you still feel a certain feeling from just those quarter notes, you know.
Immediately. You immediately
Right.
start feeling. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then some drummers like, look, man, guys like us, we spend a lot of time playing with a click, which is great, and I love the click. The click is my friend, right? But when you're playing with a drummer, you're not playing with a click. And the beauty of it is you get to know this person on a really weird, intimate level because you have respect for whatever their journey was. And some people have, we all have like really peculiar shit going on in our human DNA and our experiences. And it's going to come out in all of these weird, unexpected ways. And that's the fun part of it, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know how that is, like some drummers, like a dude I play with, like George Slupik, man, he's so Memphis, man. I don't know if you've ever played shuffle with George.
I haven't played with him, no, but I've heard him play on different people and with you and other things. Yeah.
You have got to play with him. You guys would hit it off musically. He's got that Memphis thing. I mean, Howard Grimes is kind of his mentor, and the way that he plays, it's like that. And I remember like playing like with George and feeling like, man, why is this motherfucker dragging? Why is it, you know? Then I listened to the music back and I'm like, ooh, my God, why was I making his life so miserable? You know, his groove is so deep. It's at the back of the beat, but it's right where it needs to be. It feels so good. You just have to get, you know, I always just try to tell people, like, if you're on a bandstand and you feel weird, it's probably you.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
You know, it's not the drummer. And even if it's a drummer that you might think you don't like, you still have to get where they are. You still have to listen to them and do what they're be in their universe, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're the center of the universe on the bandstand, without question. Yeah.
Oh, amen. Amen.
So when you play with a drummer like that in the studio, like say George in the studio, do you listen to the click or do you just listen to him?
I just listen to the drummer. It depends. Like, I feel like, I think a good, like if you play with a drummer you play with a lot, let them listen to the click.
That's what that's my goal at all times, is to play with guys where I don't have to listen to the click because I know
Right.
they are, and I could just play music and trust them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because look, you and I, our time is really good. Our feel is really good. But we're going to have a really different translation of the click than a great drummer that we play with is.
Mm-hmm.
And my feeling is like, I want to be working from their translation.
Yep.
Like when I read the Iliad, I don't want my translation. I want someone else's translation who knows what they're doing, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I try to get away with the only time I will listen to Click in the studio is if I have to play unaccompanied. You know, that's
Right.
it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
nope, not happening.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you, man.
Yeah.
That's the
All
way.
right. This one's probably completely self-explanatory, obviously. But normally number 5 is, when do you feel like you started to find your voice on the instrument? Well, it's obvious, you know, you've got an instrument that's completely personal to you. So let's take it a step further. When do you feel like, after you switched to your instrument, it really became yours?
Man, like I said earlier, I mean, I feel like I'm still really working on it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's an evolution, and I feel like I'm constantly peeling away layers, and every time I peel away a layer, it's just like, make it simpler. Make it simpler. You know?
In your live
deal
show,
with
do
the
you play
groove.
tunes from your very earliest records now?
No. Oh no.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So if you did, you'd play them, what, totally different now?
Totally differently, because this is such a different instrument I'm playing now.
Well, true.
You know, different
actually.
tuning. Back then I was using those tape wound strings, which are super light. Like you get away with a lot. It's like the wash tub bass of electric bass, you know, kind of, you know? Yeah, you can get away with a lot, you know? So, yeah, and people say, hey, man, can you get that old trio back together? I'm just like, man, I'd have to get that old guitar. And I know who has it. John Mayer has that old guitar. I'd have to ask John Mayer, could I borrow that guitar? I'd have to relearn how to play all that shit. I probably learned something from the experience, too. But
Yeah, crazy. All right, number 6. What do you consider your biggest weakness on the instrument?
Trying to do too much.
Really? Well, that's interesting to me, because it's like you've already handcuffed the fuck out of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but within that handcuff, like, I shouldn't be struggling. You know what I mean? The handcuffs are just on. It's like, dude, the handcuffs are on. Why are you struggling? You're handcuffed to a fucking chair. There's only so much you can do. You know, why are you struggling? You're making an ass out of yourself. You look ridiculous.
Oh, man. Do you feel like I mean, obviously now we're never on tour, so who knows? I can even remember the feeling, but you remember like the feeling 4 gigs in? Do you get that feeling where you can do no wrong and then go past it into you're doing too much?
Yeah. You know, I really don't get to that point with this guitar, because it's just so fucking hard to just make music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can imagine. I don't know what you mean, but I can imagine.
But, you know, the way I feel about it is like, I always think about it in terms of a band dynamic. Like, how is the music sounding? Is this band really fucking killing? Good. All right. I can work out my own selfish shit later. If the band is just great, then I'm good, you know?
Wow. Interesting, man. But you still find yourself trying to do too much.
I think so, you know. I mean, but the past year playing a bunch of regular guitar and all this other stuff, it's really shown me, I think I've gotten that stuff out of my system, you know. And it's funny, man. I mean, I'd be happy just to be like, you know, call me for the gig. I'm happy just to be. You know what? I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
And or whatever the groove happens to be, you know, you know. You know what? I'm happy to do that. I don't need to take a solo or anything.
Right.
But then I feel like people want to hear me take a solo. So then I kind of take a solo, and then the groove isn't as good, you know. So
That's
I
just
don't
physics,
know, man.
man. That's just physics.
Yeah, I just don't think it can only go so far. At least I found some answers. They weren't the ones I wanted to find, but
All right. Number 7. Who's a huge influence on your guitar playing or whatever that people would be surprised to hear? Like maybe on your improv. Who's a giant influence that people would be surprised to hear?
Bobby Previtt, I think.
Oh, all
In
right.
terms of improvisation, I've learned more from him about improvisation than probably anything else.
Wow.
Just the deeper concepts of improvisation, nothing to do with playing over changes or stuff like that, but actual pure conceptual improvisation.
Really?
Yeah, like total free and kind of like, compositional improvisation. I learned more from that guy, I think, than probably anybody else.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, this
And
one
he actually has a Patreon where he does these improvisation workshops. They last for like a week. They're like
really?
a full day. Yeah, it's insane, man, how much shit he's got going on, Definitely investigate it if you have a chance.
I will. That's inspiring. All right. This one also self-explanatory. Would you on a fly gig, would you rather be stuck with a great amp and a shitty guitar or vice versa? A great guitar and a shitty amp. Well, you can't do the gig unless you have your guitar.
Yeah.
So I guess that one answers itself.
And dude, I mean, we used to get so upset. Like, you show up to this gig in a really nice place and I have to rent a bass amp and a guitar amp, and you show up and it's like a bass amp is like a 100-watt like amp with like a 112 speaker, and the guitar amp is like a twin with like 2 JBLs in it.
Oh.
And and eventually I just came to the point where it was like, okay, I guess I just got to get used to this shit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I think you just have to get used to it,
Yeah. Yeah. See, for me, it's the amp is more important, but I'm not as obviously reliant on the instrument. Like it's doesn't make the gig if I don't have my guitar.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I did a tour with Bobby Previtt where I was playing just regular 6-string guitar.
Right.
And at the time I really didn't have one, and so I was like, hey man, let's backline guitars. Also because I was like, this is gonna be the best thing. I don't have to carry a guitar with me on a European tour.
Yeah. And
it was an interesting experience, man, because the best guitar I played was probably like a $300 Korean-made SG copy. And the worst guitar I played was a 1964 Stratocaster.
Yeah.
Who knows,
Well, you probably enjoyed a little bit of the, crapshoot aspect of it.
It was cool. It was really fun, actually.
But you more enjoyed the not having to carry anything.
That was the best part.
All right. Number 9. What keeps you so motivated, man, to push forward and get better? It's something I'll admit that I succumb to a lot, is that thought of I got to learn something else. I got to keep pushing. I'm sucking, and I'm obsessed with being better tomorrow than today. What keeps you on that track?
Well, we all are, right? I mean, that's how we're kind of
it's how we end up where we are.
And we all have a different way of kind of finding our way to what we think is important in terms of in our evolution, right? And for me, it's been trying to get my groove better. Just simple stuff, really, I got this cocktail drum kit, and I've just been working on that for the last month. Every day I come out there, I'm just look, man, it's one drum. It's got a bass drum on the bottom, a snare drum on top, and I have a funny little 14-inch cymbal. I'm not going to impress anybody. Let's really deal with the groove and the feel, because every time I listen to stuff that I played like made a record, like it better feel better now than it did 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like the feel
Yeah.
better be more happening, because I think I could get to a point where I do need to learn some more counterpoint. But I think mostly what I'm looking for is just to play simple parts on the low end and the high end and just make it feel better. Make it feel good enough that somebody wants to play with it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you found your recipe. You're just improving your recipe every day.
Oh, right on, man. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use that.
All right. There you go. I just can't, it was
It's
on the
my
fly.
secret.
There you go.
It's
There you go.
my secret recipe. It gives you salmonella every time.
Every time. Yeah. I don't wash the cutting board. Sorry.
No.
Oh, man. All right. Well, then number 10, do you have like a 5-year plan? Or are you a guy that sets goals? Are there really specific things that you want to accomplish in your career and just in general? Or are you more, let's see where it goes? And, you know, I know you put in the effort no matter what. So is it more fly by the seat of the pants, or do you set serious goals?
I just see how it goes. I just fly by the seat of the pants, really. I mean, I'm just trying to get enough just basic skills together, and I'm really seriously honest. I'm not being like trying to be like falsely modest. I'm just trying to get enough basic skills together so that when I get in a unknown situation, I hopefully have something I can offer, you know. So that it goes. I mean, in terms of like career stuff, I mean, you've been doing the same as me. I mean, I've been driving in laps around the States for 30 years, man. I don't know how much farther you get as like a guitar player, like in our game. Like, what's the next thing? You know, I kind of, so I'm happy if I could just get a gig playing at like my local laundromat or on my back porch, I would do that.
Yeah.
And just to be able to wake up and work on the music all the time and get to hang out with my friends like you and talk about this and learn new shit, you know, have my values questioned. I mean, not like right now, but you know, that's what we do. We kind of like, hey, you know, if someone will say something and maybe it's something you haven't thought about, it actually does throw you for a loop. You know, you have to go back and listen to some shit or whatever it is. That's the shit that makes me excited, man. Like the community and the fact that right now everyone I know is working on shit, and I don't want to let them down by not working on shit too, you know.
Okay. Yeah. That's a healthy attitude.
That's all I have. I mean, some days I let them down for sure.
Yeah, but that's I mean, that's a very healthy attitude, man. Very much.
I guess so, but you know how it is, man. It takes a long time to come by that stuff, you know.
It does, but we're old now.
Especially with the Jewish DNA, man. Like that stuff is deep, regardless of what we want to believe about it or not. That's a deep thing.
You know what's funny about it? I don't know about your upbringing, but mine is I'm so not scattered, but I'm so like two people. I can be so incredibly motivated when it's the things I care about, and I can be so incredibly lazy when it's anything else. You know what I mean? And that's part of being creative too, I think. But it's like I'm like literally I hate to admit this, but it's like I could be sitting in the house thinking about a project that I'm in the middle of and not even hear my wife or my son talk to me. You know what I mean? They're speaking right to me, and it's just I don't even hear, you know, because I'm like I don't know. Whatever.
You're in it. But when you grew up, did you grow up in like a observant household or?
No, I mean we went to synagogue. I had my bar mitzvah, like all that. But it wasn't, we weren't very religious. We didn't go to synagogue every week or anything like that, you know. My grandparents were more religious than my parents. But, I mean, we had, you know, Passover dinner and you know, all that stuff. And we went on Yom Kippur, you know, and lit candles and the whole. Yeah. So, I mean, I consider myself a Jew, you know. Now, since I became an adult, I'm much less of a Jew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, you know, but Yeah, like my
I
son is
think
not bar
people
mitzvahed.
people like you and I were Jew-ish.
Yeah, ish. Eh,
Like, there's all of that stuff, like, because I didn't grow up in the religion at all. I grew up with like the cultural lefty kind of New York Jew thing.
yeah.
And, but that's part of the culture. You know what I mean? And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that that's a very Jewish thing. And it took me a long time to realize that, even though I didn't have a bar mitzvah, I didn't do any of that stuff. And then in my life, I'm always finding myself, how do I always find myself hanging out with these Jews? What's
That
happening to me?
that is a really interesting thing, because so many of my friends are Jewish, and our friendship has nothing to do with the fact that we're Jews, like literally zero.
Yeah.
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 So that's an interesting point. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
Same here. It's crazy. It's a trip.
Yeah. All right. Well, dude, we made it to the end of the 10 questions. We
This
did
was
it.
great, man. This is
Dude.
awesome.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I mean, it's been a really pleasurable for me to hear your story. I love it.
Oh, me too, man. This was a ball. I got to go on. Is this on your Patreon page that you do this?
No, this will be on YouTube and as a podcast. And then
Okay, great.
So for rulers, we'll be back with the turn 2. If you're not a ruler yet, please subscribe to my channel or become a member, become a ruler. It's greatly appreciated. But yeah. So basically, it'll be on YouTube and as a podcast, and then this little thing we do after it, that's for the members. Which instead of doing Patreon, I have members on YouTube
Got you.
because they
Oh, how
launched
cool.
a Patreon-ish kind of thing on YouTube.
Oh, they did. I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, rulers, we'll be right back with the turn 2. Thanks, Charlie.
Right on.